Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And today we are recording an episode that I'm not sure when it will come out, but I'm very excited about it.
We've been talking about this episode for a minute.
Yeah, we have. Actually, I think over a year at least. But I really got a catalyst when our friend of the show, listener Jamie, wrote in and suggested, quote, "What about shipping and problematic ships, like the non-con, forcing a sexual aspect into a friendship, and shipping wars with the related internet abuse?" Which for some of you, I bet you're like, what does that mean? We're going to talk about it. We're going to break it all down. But yeah, this is a big conversation right now, and it's changed so much since I started being fanish in the fan space. So there's a lot to go over and a lot of history. This might be a two-parter. I don't think it will be, but who knows? We'll see.
You always, I feel like you and I both are like, it's not going to be that long. And then it ends up being either the full amount and then some. And especially for those who are like, maybe what? But then again, we've also had those moments. It's like, this is going to be really long. And then it ends up being not.
Yeah. Yes. So it's hard to say because I do have a lot of thoughts about this. And I'm actually going to put my thoughts at the end of this episodes. But they'll be throughout, I'm sure. I just have a lot of opinions. Also, very brief spoilers for Good Omens Season 2. Very vague. And at the end, and I'll give a heads up, but a big part of the conversation right now, shall I say.
My TikTok is full of Michael and David, doing their little parody shows. It's the entire thing. And I guess because Good Omens 2 had come out, there's more ads. And I'm like, why? I don't even know them that well, but they're really funny.
It also could be, didn't you? You sent me one.
I did. Well, because I had been getting them in my feed. I was like, why am I getting so much of this content? And then when I asked you, you were like, no, I haven't seen, because they did the whole Zoom show, web series, I believe, with the director from Good Omens. And I was like, have you not seen this? Well, you definitely have to, because it's right up your alley. And I've never seen Good Omens either.
I do love Good Omens. Oof. Well,
getting into that.
So today we are talking about shipping, but I guess that we should start with a definition for people who might not know. What is shipping?
Yes, and I love that this is from Urban Dictionary, because we do talk about a lot of fanfic words from Urban Dictionary, don't we? So it is from Urban Dictionary, the act of one supporting two individuals involved in a romantic relationship. A verb used to describe the action of wishing for two people to enter a relationship, whether romantic or occasionally platonic, in books, movies, TV shows, or real life. Shipping can often happen involuntarily, and it is the majority of what happens on the website Tumblr. Really? Tumblr.
Oh my
gosh. There are some very popular ships, some unpopular, as well as often lots of controversy between ships from the same fandom.
I would also say that it can include two or more individuals. This says two people. It can be more. It could be a polycule. But yeah, that's pretty good. But that's where the name comes from. Shipping.
Yeah, and you know what? With people who are not a part of the fanfic world, because I've noticed this as I'm on a lot of the K-pop TikToks, that when they do the shipping, I get very confused thinking it's real, because they do this montage, and I'm like, wait, are they? Is this true? I'm very confused, and I take it as a reality, because when they do that with real people, I'm very confused about what just happened, essentially.
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I'm not even going to talk about it in here, but that is something people do. We'll make videos, we'll make this content that you're like, wait, what?
And then they'll do rumored things on there that I'm like, what? Did that happen? Did that really happen? Where they're like, and the main, of course, the ones that I've seen the most of has been like Stray Kids and of course BTS. But the BTS one has kind of wavered down, and the Stray Kids have a lot more content because of it. Like they're very affectionate kids with each other. Like I'm not sure if they are together, wonderful. But I'm like, y'all are confusing me as a person who has no idea what's happening in this shipping fanfic world. And then you put two real people. And then put this like glossy montage of them that I'm like, did that really happen? Is that a thing?
Oh yes, it's a whole world. Samantha.
So confused. And I'd assume that because they are idols of sorts, that the fans would not want them to be together since they're in love with them. I thought, or like they had but apparently it really is a big thing. That they want them to be together.
I have a lot of thoughts about this, actually. Because I think, and it's understandable, people get weirded out when people ship real people. And trust me, as we've discussed several times on the show, there are problems with that, especially when you start hating on a real life person.
Right.
But I also think that a lot of times when people ship real life people, or when they write fanfic about real life people, it's not someone you know. It's not somebody you've ever met. So it is almost like a fictional character in that way. And usually one person, and we actually are going to talk about this, but there's like a stand-in for the person you think you're like, and stand-in for the person you want to be with.
Right. I feel like you've mentioned that before in our fanfic episodes, but like, I found that interesting because it actually has damaged some people's reputations, because in things like South Korea, Asian countries, which is very like homophobic countries, when they did that, there would be rumors swirling about, and then like papers that would be coming out, be like, no, that's not true, and having to like separate people. So even if they're really good friends, they can't be around each other because of these like made up stories about real people. So I'm like, oh, that's sad, but it's such an odd phenomenon when you see fanfic like that go like overlapping real life.
It is interesting. I know I've said it before, but I've read some fan fiction about myself, and I was like, oh, cool. That's cooler than me.
That's cooler than you. Wait, do you have a ship? Is there a ship for you and Lauren or something?
There's been a ship between me and Lauren. There's been a ship between me and Bridget. I haven't checked since you came on. I don't know. But
I didn't even think. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't even think about that.
I mean, Samantha.
I guess it makes sense, especially if it's about you. And I'm like, huh.
You set yourself
so
up.
Would I be in that one? Would I be the unapproachable one? Because isn't that how it goes? There's one that gets hard. That has to soften up for one person.
Kind of. And I swear we actually are going to talk about this, and I didn't know about this, but I was like, oh my God. I'm usually like the shy, embarrassed,
naive one.
Yes, and then everyone else that I've been shipped with is like, come to this bar with me.
Oh dear. Oh yeah. Which would be hilarious and very fictional, because I'm the one who's like, I'm not going to a bar. You can come over to my house and hang out.
But that's kind of my point, is that there's like this understanding of
that's funny.
These flashes we get of people online, or how we understand them to be. So it does feel kind of fictional. Like when I read something like that, I'm like, oh no, it's not.
It was obviously not me, but
it's
thanks.
Cute. Like I was like, oh. Go to that bar, Anney.
You go to that bar. Touch her fingers lightly as you brush each other's drinks
and
or
then
something.
Blush furiously. Oh my gosh.
And turn around.
Maybe this will be a two-parter. We haven't even gotten the second definition.
I'm sorry. It's too good to get into before we start. So let's jump into the second part of the definition.
Yes. So this is from Fanlore Wiki. Shipping in fandom is the act of supporting or wishing for a particular romantic relationship. That is a het, different sex, / male/male, fem/female/female, or poly, 3 or more characters, ship. By discussing it, writing meta about it, or creating other types of fan works exploring it. Fans who have and promote favorite ships are called shippers. They might assert that the relationship does exist or will exist in canon, that they would like it to exist, or simply that they enjoy imagining it. Shippers who support multiple ships within a single canon are often referred to as multi-shippers, especially if they support those ships equally. The relationships that fans promote or wish for are not all happy, fluffy bunny ones. Fans also enjoy enemy slash and wrong shipping. We're going to talk about that more later, but yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm so old that wrong shipping, I was like as in you sent it to the wrong address.
I've seen reactions like that, so I don't think you're alone. It has got a lot more mainstream, though. We're going to talk about that too. Some shippers support relationships that are portrayed or acknowledged as established in canon. Some shippers like relationships that exist only as subtext, whether intentional or accidental, itself a topic of debate. And some prefer relationships where the characters have no subtext discernible to non-shippers. Some fans ship characters who never even appear in canon together. Me, later, I'll talk about that. It is important to note that some percentage of fans actively do not want their ship to become canon, especially wrong shippers and fans who don't trust the shows and writers to do it right. Shippers have been known to regret it when their wish came true. There's a very famous example of that we'll talk about. And yes, okay, so I didn't know about this, but when I read it, I was like, oh, obviously. There's also anti-shippers or no romos, no romance.
Why does that sound like an insult or a slur? I don't like that.
Yes, it's close to it. Who actively don't want romance between characters. They can be just as passionate as shippers in their fight against a ship. And some of the earliest online no romos feel that they lost when Mulder and Scully's relationship became canon. Because if you haven't seen the X-Files, that's actually where shipping, the term, first showed up. Mulder and Scully did eventually get together. And so...
Was that always the plan, though?
Oh, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they often say that they want to believe that relationships can be platonic. Gonna break that down later, too. There's a lot to break down in this.
I think this is going to be a two-parter, Annie. I think you're wrong.
We'll see. This is fun. We'll all find out together. It is something fandoms love to fight over. And sometimes in a healthy way and sometimes in a very, very, very unhealthy way. But it is often something people bond over, too. The ship typically has a name, and sometimes one of the first questions fans will ask each other, when that Dido song came out, I will go down with this ship. That became a very popular meme, especially because David Boreanaz was in that music video. And Angel, Buffy, Spike, shipping wars.
Which has a lot of shipping, I'm sure. Because also Willow has her own little... shipping.
Yes, she does. Yeah. Yes, she does. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is big in this conversation, so you can look forward to that too.
Is Supernatural too?
Oh, yes.
I thought so. That's the first thing. I think that's the first notification of me knowing about shipping was, of course, Destiel. But I was like, what is happening?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I feel like that's my theme phrase. What is happening?
Yes, I think so. As Dragon Con approaches, I think this will come out after Dragon Con, but one of the first questions I would get sometimes from people when I was dressed as the Winter Soldier would be, are you Stucky? Or are you whatever the name is for the Black Widow and Bucky ship, which I can't remember. And
There's a Black Widow Bucky ship?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
I would have thought more Falcon and Bucky.
Well, I think after the show came out, because I remember watching that and being like, you guys are really leaning into this sexual tension here. And a lot of people texted me and were like, is this what you're talking about with fan fiction? I was like, yeah, that's it. But I hadn't. At that point, I wasn't dressing as the Winter Soldier anymore so much, but
yeah,
it's just funny to me that people would come up and that was what they wanted to know was who do you ship?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And okay, apparently the ship name for Katniss and Peeta from the Hunger Games is penis.
Why they gotta do it like that? That's so
I
rude.
love that so
why?
much.
So I feel like that was made up by people who did not want Peeta and Katniss to get together. They wanted what's his name?
Well, I
The
tried to
Hemsworth
like,
kid.
Gail,
I'm so good at not knowing any
you
of
are
the
nailing
characters. I love that I sound like so old and outdated because I can't remember a damn character.
Well, the funny thing is, you're so much better than me at actors' names.
Yeah, but I
I'm
can't
so much
figure out-
better at character names.
I can't remember the character. I know the actor.
Well, see
Hemsworth
that,
dude.
we're fitting together though. This is
why we are the okay. This is the ship that I just finished your sentences the entire time, or that you finished mine.
That's it. Kind of. I translate for you. You translate for me.
It's beautiful.
I don't know if they pronounce it penis, but it's pronounced Peeta and Katniss, so I feel like it's penis.
It's
but
penis.
Somebody let me in and write in and let me know.
So the Galeness is the one that made this ship name, I think.
Okay. Penis. I hope that's true. That is very funny. Steve Rogers and Tony Stark is Stony. I found this whole like chart of the names, and I was laughing so hard. It was great.
That's pretty good.
Stony. I mean, come on.
It's cute.
People do get really excited about the smallest things when they ship something or ship someone, and it'll be like, "Oh, did you see that? Look, you've seen me do this."
Yes.
Oh, they're in love, Your Honor. Oh, people will write essays supporting their theory. They write fan fiction. They make fan art. They'll make predictions. They get invested. There are websites dedicated to ships. There are websites dedicated to like anti-ships, people you don't want to get together. There are Tumblr communities. There are Discords. That's one of my favorite tags in fan fiction was whatever ship Discord made me do it. So yeah, people are into it. And also, yes, the sex and subtext is a big joke, which they had on Supernatural.
They did.
Mm-hmm. But that's basically implying like you're kind of reading into the meta of the whole thing. In my experience, in the fictional shipping world, not celebrities, people largely ship two men. They're often two white men, and often interviews the celebrities who play these characters. Those interviews are used for evidence too, and they are often asked who they ship.
I did find it interesting that when it's just shipping, it means two men automatically instead of just two people, and instead of and then having to be like femship. And I was like, oh wait, they had to add that.
Well,
that's interesting.
Well, actually, okay, so
I just got actually.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. No, you're right. You're right. But I didn't realize this. Once you account for non-fanfic specific fan spaces, there are a lot more hetero ships. So Slash is a very fan fiction name.
Slash, not ship, sorry.
Yeah. So Slash is very from fan fiction. And we've talked about the history of it before. And then Fem Slash comes from that. And I actually read a really fascinating, like 1993, what were those called? Bulletin board, those like online bulletin board spaces. But anyway, it was like a little short thing where someone was saying she was making the point that people who were so supportive of Slash weren't supportive of Fem Slash. And it was really fascinating because she was like, I can see you only support this one type of thing and not this other thing. Like that really upsets you, but this doesn't. It was cool.
That's interesting. I don't know. Like, again, I'm not a part of this, but I'm very into the K-drama world. And in that same scope, they really love the BL, which we've talked about in the K-drama episodes or typically any Asian episodes, which is like, the title is, it's not what it sounds like, because in the US, we're like, what is that? Boy love, but essentially like two men together. And that's kind of it's a whole genre. And there's so much of that, way more than there's about two women, which I thought was odd. But again, the people who are eating up this content are typically women.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You can see our fan fiction episode for that. I think I also did one specifically on Slash. But there's a lot of theories why that is. There's actually like research papers and books about why that is.
I mean, it's interesting.
It
that
is.
it carries over, just for like romances, especially.
Mm-hmm. I did find many articles that reported how queer fan fiction helps people come out, realize they were queer. And so this is a big part of like when you start shipping and you're like, oh, this is a queer relationship. Why am I shipping this? And then people be like, wait a minute, let me think about this a bit more. Which, speaking of, while this term is relatively recent, it was first used in 1993 in regards to X-Files fandom, which was my, oh, maybe I'm queer moment. People have been doing this forever. I found really fun examples from like Jane Austen, like Sherlock Holmes way back. Like, it's really fascinating. However, the internet and social media really allowed for these ship communities to grow, for people to find each other, but it also allowed for bad behavior to be amplified, and it has led to a lot of internet abuse. And interestingly, in the early days, shipping was mocked and looked down upon. Sometimes it was even viewed as you saying like something that you're all enjoying is not perfect, heaven forbid. Like you're not a real fan because you're like wanting more. Maybe you're being weird. And people who shipped would get email attacks or harassed. But now it's definitely gone mainstream. And with that, we have seen a lot of issues. And it's just funny to me looking back at this where I'm like, now it's just you don't ship who I want you to ship. That gets you the attacks and the harassment. But back then, apparently, people who shipped were getting that. Strange.
You've come a long way, baby.
Yes. Yes, we have, Samantha. But that brings us to shipping wars, which is one of the biggest issues. I'm
so literal. I'm like, UPS and FedEx shipping wars?
We should have had you do like your version of what you thought this was.
What this was.
And compared it. It would have been great.
Oh, I'm so old. Keep going.
So, from Teen Vogue, and where there's shipping, there are ship wars. Aggressive in-community beefs between fandom factions that focus on different ships in the same piece of media or fandom. Ship wars have a rich history of stirring up heightened emotion. Back when Buffy the Vampire Slayer dominated online fandom, one of the biggest ship wars in fandom history revolved around Buffy's relationships with two of the hottest and most toxic vampires this side of the Vampire Diaries extended universe, Spike and Angel. Yes, more on that in a second. Oh my gosh. I did see Final Fantasy VII. I've talked about it on here before. But the whole thing in that game was based on decisions you made. You would end up with one of like 4 people, but really 2 people, Tifa and Aerith. And people would pick sides. Like, obviously, he should have gone with Aerith. Obviously, he should have gone with Tifa. And that was kind of programmed into the game. That was like, there was this whole thing where Aerith died. Spoilers, but that game's really old. And there was this belief if you were nicer to her, if you did all these things, if you were in a romantic relationship, she would live, which she wouldn't. But there was a belief that she would. So people really pick sides. Another big one is Team Edward versus Team Jacob from Twilight.
Of course.
Yes. And then I totally forgot about this. But when I read about it, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. The Harmony Wars. The Harmonians. People were so pissed, Samantha. Oh my gosh. There was a whole live journal about killing off Ron Weasley in as many ways as possible. Because essentially this was people who thought Harry and Hermione should be together.
Right. I mean, people really hated on Ginny.
Yes.
Really hated on Ginny.
Oh, yes.
Poor actress.
Yes. So this was before, a lot of this was happening as people were going online more. Harry Potter is still one of the biggest fan fiction communities that exist. And there was this big break between the Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix. And before that, like, so no one knew who was going to end up with whom. But people had all this time to speculate. So there was the Harmonians. I think it was called the USS Harmonian. So it's like a ship. Anyway, so they were like really adamant that this was how it was going to go. And then J.K. Rowling said in an interview, oh no, it's definitely not that. And one of the interviewers said Harmonians were delusional. And there was kind of laughter and all the stuff. J.K. Rowling backtracked about it. She didn't attach herself to the word delusional, but was also kind of like, yeah. But she did say she thought she had dropped these huge hints and that it was obvious who was going to end up with whom. From Claire McBride over at Sci-Fi Wire. But even early on, the tension between these two factions ran hot. Sugar Quill, one of the first Harry Potter-specific fic archives, refused to accept Harry Hermione fanfiction on the grounds that it was not canon compliant. Interestingly, they accepted Remus Sirius fic as canon compliant because it was, which may have contributed to the opening of Fiction Alley, which pointedly accepted all ships. Ship-specific fan sites and communities became the norm, allowing the factions to more or less peaceably coexist, although the occasional battles still happened. Up until this point, they trusted that they were correctly reading Rowling's larger plan, and that they were the only ones doing so. They were heavily invested in not only the veracity of their ship, but the morality of it, valuing a relationship built on friendship over what they saw as a relationship built on conflict, among many other values they assigned to their ship. Because they'd invested so heavily in this one ship, to the detriment of making wider connections in fandom and developing a diverse interest in the series, Rowling's revelation threatened to invalidate not only their ship, but their fandom. So they turned their ire on her. Harmonians began to openly insult Rowling, calling into question her talent as a writer, denigrating her for being divorced, and even insulting her personal appearance. One post even indulges in some pearl clutching, wondering if the moral of Ron/Hermione is really one she wants to pass down to her daughters. The ship meant more to them than the fandom did. This is the moment that birthed zero-sum shipping, a kind of blind gamemanship that only values a ship for whether or not it wins, not whether or not it is enjoyable. And of note, this was pre-Twitter, so this could have been a lot worse.
The battle.
Yeah, but it was funny because my mom had opinion on this. She obviously wasn't like doing this, but she thought it should have been Harry and Hermione. And I remember being like, oh.
I don't know if I ever had an opinion on it, but it was like, yeah, it doesn't make as much sense. But I get it. Like, the side characters, he has his own trauma. He doesn't really need... I think that was the part. It's like, he doesn't need a romance right now. He's got too much on his plate.
Yeah. Yeah. And my mom was she was very blasé about it. But it was just funny because, like, normally she wouldn't even
care.
Have a thought about it. But she did say that. And I was like, oh.
Opinion.
Yeah, but that morality that writer mentioned is a key point of this, because there's this whole idea of like, my ship is better than yours.
Right.
Because, as I said, ships are not new. They've been around since we've been telling stories and could have opinions, but they have evolved. It used to be, and still is, largely, I would say, a fun thing. There are plenty, the majority of people who can ship without being absolutely awful. But it's gotten way more intense as we are all online. And now, when someone believes they found the OTP, the one true pairing, they think they are right, you are wrong, and it gets heated and outright hateful. Jamie described it as almost a religion. A part of this is that you've interpreted the media in question correctly, that there is just one right way, one correct pairing, and if they don't agree with someone, then they will shame people, harass people, shun people, dox people, swat people, even threaten creators.
How old are the ranges for people who like are active on those kind of boards?
I mean, I think it depends on the specific site. Because I know we talked about this before. The fan fiction is like my forte, so that's what I know off the top of my head. But like Wattpad is for younger folks. There's another one that more younger people use, and then AO3 and fanfic.net are like older folks. And by that I mean, I don't know, like my age.
Like, what's older mean?
I mean, it can go. I think they're much more like, I would say, 25 to 40. Which is a big range. I think there's more outliers on that than there are on Wattpad. I could be wrong, which I feel is much younger.
Right. I just wondered because, that's a lot of time and effort to go after and debate with people. And I know some people do that, does it for any and all subjects, but I find that interesting for fictional characters. That level of love and passion. Like, you have to have some time and dedication for that.
That's kind of part of the issue. It doesn't have to be an issue, but part of it is if it becomes like it consumes all of your time and someone's telling you in your mind, you're wrong, but you've spent all this time on it. You've looked for all the clues. You've done all of this digging and research. And so it's like, you don't get it.
I mean, I've seen you watch Star Wars and you telling me your theories and me just going, really? And you go, wait, no, but this evidence.
Well, see, the funny thing is I'm a multi-shipper, which is, I have a lot of ships. And so I can be like, I can take evidence and make my case for one couple. And then that same evidence, I'll be like, disregard this couple though. And so, which I think is a good way to be.
The many times I heard, do you see that stare? Do you see that look? Don't know. No, you can't tell me.
People have written it about that look. They know what look it is. I'm not kidding. People know.
I'm sure. I picture it the moment you say it. I know what scene I'm talking about because you've done it every time.
Yep.
Every time.
Oh, yeah. What a
the
look.
Dedication to that. I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. That's a look.
It is. It's a look. But that's what it is. And that's like the fun part of it. Like when you can just be like,
yes.
And then you don't mind if someone doesn't agree with you.
There was no disagreement. I was just the nod. You get the nod from me. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
No, don't derail me because now I just want to talk about that. I have had
the
more
side
than one
look that you're having, like contemplating, do I go down this road?
I've had more than one friend say, I didn't see it before, but now I see it. And I was like,
That's right.
That's right. Okay. But speaking of, from that same article from Sci-Fi, what was once the love of two characters dynamic has become, to a small but outspoken subsection of fans, a zero-sum game. How did we get from, God, I love seeing these two together, to these two need to be together, so help me God? And this quote is going back to that Teen Vogue article, which I really recommend. I've been a part of several ship wars, never an active participant, really just a member of ships that are fought over. And I think it all comes down to wanting to feel right. Fandom, especially fanfic, is all about participating in and taking ownership of the material. Colleen, a pop culture nerd and scholar who made it through the Voltron fandom, shares with Teen Vogue. Ship wars are caused by people wanting their ship to be the number one correct ship, the only one. And even if it's not canon, it's the one. So you see things like Katang versus Zutara, where on the one hand, you have people arguing their ship is better because it's canon and it's sweet. And on the other hand, arguing for tension and character development. In that case, it's a matter of preference and power. Each ship/fandom wants to be in charge. Yes, I think that's really interesting because we are going to discuss this more, but that whole you go to fan fiction because you can't find the relationship you want in canon, or maybe they don't do it. And then what happens when it does become canon? But essentially most of what I read is, it comes down to this, is the quote unquote healthier relationship versus the quote unquote unhealthier relationship, which is up for, debate. But yes, creators and celebrities get this abuse too. Even extending to real life relationships of celebrities. That's something we've talked about before. Some creators have been blackmailed in an attempt to force a ship and make it canon. Some have been forced off social media, and it gets nasty. Like, people will tear people up who support the opposing ship. They will claim that theirs is the least problematic ship, while pointing out the problematic parts of the opposing ships and people who ship them. Like, it becomes like, well, if you like this ship, then that means you're messed up in this way. You're a Puritan / goody two shoes, or you're actually a criminal. Then there is the the hate that is heaped onto the characters, as you mentioned with Jenny Weasley, perhaps, usually the canon ship, often a woman, who ruined your ship and the person who created them or played them. People who did ship with these toxic fans. So if you're like shipping a ship and then all these toxic fans come in, sometimes you get forced out of that ship because you're like, well, right, you ruined it. Sometimes the creators make it worse with their comments, making fun of a ship or being queer baity. Often they have no idea how much fandom is behind a ship, I would say. Not always, but I feel like a lot of the examples I wrote, I was like, oof, why did you say that? Which points to an interesting disconnect between creators and their fans. MCU story editor Matthew Chauncey, who's responsible for the What If Zombie episode, which is that like Marvel kind of alternate realities animated series, reportedly wanted zombie Captain America to bite off Sharon's lips and spit them out because, quote, no one likes her. Actually, he belongs to Peggy. Which he might have been joking, maybe not, but it does fuel these fights and this hate. Perhaps he did it intentionally. Perhaps he didn't. I don't know.
My only problem with that whole storyline was, wait, couldn't he be her grandfather now? Or great uncle now or something? This whole like timeline thing. I'm like, this doesn't bode well.
I will say, I don't think the MCU has done a romance very well yet. I know some people disagree with me, but I don't think so.
I'm trying to think of a good one.
I think a lot of people would say like WandaVision, but I actually don't think so.
They weren't together, and then she fell in love with a make-believe thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was my biggest hang up with that show is I was like, I just don't buy your relationship because you just suddenly told me you were dating and then he died. And I'm like...
And it felt so forced anyway from the beginning. Maybe, am I going to get hate for that? It did.
It did. But almost all the relationships in the MCU felt very forced.
Yeah.
But anyway.
We're going to get there. Sorry. There are even conspiracy theories that for one reason or another, something is canon, but the creators cannot admit it. Like, it is canon. They just can't say it's canon. I've seen that one a lot.
And this used to be a big thing in fan fiction, which is kind of, a lot of people brought up, it's kind of gone by the wayside. But it used to be like, there was a certain tag for it. But it was like, we're playing in our sandbox, whatever they do, that's their thing, that we're playing in our sandbox. Whereas now it's crossed the line into, let's yell at them online. But it used to be much more like, nope, that's the powers that be. That's what it was. The powers that be. You that's what they've decided and that's how it is, but I'm going to play in this sandbox. But now it's become like it has to be canon, which is part of this issue. Also, yes, we have talked about celebrity shipping, which is essentially, you're just two real people, or more than two real people again. But that usually, like, the unhealthy side of that is definitely that it has real world impacts, that it impacts usually, like, the celebrity's new partner, again, is often a woman. And this has resulted in people being forced off social media, celebrities having to release statements asking for people to essentially not harass their partner or their ex, like post about mental health and all of this. So that's definitely an issue. And then, as Jamie said in the original suggestion for this, there are some ships that are truly problematic. And from what I've read, as mentioned, a lot of ship wars do boil down to, should person A, who is torn between two people, go with the bad boy type or the good guy type? And this is not, it doesn't mean that the good guy is without problems, but I found out this is known as cinnamon roll ships versus trash ships. And I was like, oh, yes.
Trash ships, huh?
Trash ships. So here's a quote about that from Vox. For instance, a ship like Kylux, Kylo Ren, and the minor character Hux in The Force Awakens might be labeled a trash ship because it's seen as a representation of fandom's heavily white status quo, your average ubiquitous white dude / pairing, and a ship like Ichabod, that's a fun name too, Ichabod Crane / Abby Mills on Sleepy Hollow might be seen as a cinnamon roll ship, both because of the pureness of their love and because one of its members is a woman of color. Again, this being fandom, these issues are very layered, controversial, and complicated. So essentially, a trash ship is like a ship you ship even though you know it's bad. You know it's problematic. You know it's toxic.
So would this be the Buffy and...
Yes.
What's his name?
Oh, yes. Buffy and Spike.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. I'm so excited you brought that up. But yes. Yes. I did see some recent articles about multi-shippers who ship toxic, problematic ships and healthy, wholesome ones. And they were saying like it's not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you're all over the place. Sometimes it just happens. It really does. I ship people. I'm like, how did this happen? I never would have guessed. But there are also shippers for abusive relationships, for non-consensual / manipulative, controlling relationships, underage relationships with massive age differences, incest, which is kind of complicated in terms of fanfic because I don't read it, but I think a lot of times there's an understanding that we all know they aren't actually related, plus things like Game of Thrones, like I don't know. Because
that's the thing about Supernatural is the brothers, and everybody's like, what are you doing?
Wincest, yep. One day I'll come back to that. And I'll also come back to ABO, which I've talked about before. We talked about it in our Dubcom episode. That stands for Alpha, Beta, Omega. And it's kind of like a secondary gender, political, biological type of writing and relationship, and those are often very toxic. But they also are interesting in how they explore gender politics. I have a lot of thoughts about that as well, but we won't go into them now because that would be a whole episode. But there's a lot of shipping in that realm that's pretty problematic. Yeah. And then, as mentioned earlier, wrong shipping.
I'm just laughing about so many things right now. Go.
Yes. So back to that fan lore wiki article. When a fan ships two characters who really shouldn't be together, they are wrong shipping. Wrong shipping isn't a judgment made about a fan's shipping preferences, but the recognition that the characters in question would be a hot mess together. Wrong shipping can also be used when the fan is in support of a pairing other than the canon OTP. So this is sort of like, they won't. It won't be good.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna assume from now on, I'm not on this. Which I assumed from the beginning, which you were like, you got some parts. I was like, why?
Well, I put them in and then I was just like, well, no.
Because I like me saying that would be so out of context because I have no idea why I'm saying this.
I got it. Yep.
So I'm just gonna go with that. But I'm like, I have no idea what that just happened.
That's what it's like when you get in the world of shipping, Samantha. You get lost in the shipping. And then related, at the top I mentioned like antis,
right.
non-romos, no romos. Actually, this is sort of different. Because there's a difference between people who don't want any ship, like maybe they just don't want romance, versus people who actively don't want a certain ship. And they have gotten in on this toxicity too. And I found this quote from Geek Dad. The most aggressive of the bunch is a new subset of shippers collectively known as antis, from the practice of tagging things anti-ship name on social media. It's a term these toxic members of fandom wear proudly, despite its association with combative behavior. Antis appear to be a response to, among other factors, changes in how fans interact online. As fans move from sites like LiveJournal, where content was opt-in, to Tumblr, where content is opt-out, the method in which fans consumed content changed. Thanks to Antis, the old adage of early fandom, don't like, don't read. Yep. Or the idea that consumers are responsible for avoiding content they don't like, has been replaced with discourse, death threats, and violence. Discussions shifted from, I don't like this, to no one should like this. This often involves moral arguments. It's sort of devolved into, I can morally prove you're a terrible person for this ship to destroy it. I thought that was so interesting because we've talked before, I love the history of how those technologies impact our discourse, and in this case I didn't know that. That's really cool. I mean, not cool, but like I'm glad to know it. You can on AO3 you can be like, I don't want this ship to show up, but it doesn't like populate like how Tumblr it would be like you find all of this stuff that's like, I hate this ship. It's more like then that ship just won't show up.
Okay.
Yeah. The quote goes on, anti-arguments may shift over time, but the critical thing to note is, 1, competing popular pairings that share characters with the anti-favored pairing are always problematic, and 2, the anti-preferred pairing is never problematic. If you take nothing else from this article, please take this. All this outrage isn't about protecting children, or about morality, or about critiquing media. It's about people wanting their favorite characters to kiss. It's true. It's so true though, because it gets real nasty. The things people will say about like why your ship is awful. But really it does come down to you probably just want these people to kiss.
Kind of reminds me of the 30 Rock episode in which the daughter of the owner of the company just really likes soap operas. And she's, because there was a whole ship with Tina Fey's character and Alec Baldwin's character. Again, I don't remember the characters' names. Any of their characters, and so like they play it up going, kiss, kiss, kiss. And they're like, nope, we can't do this. Because they try to do it. But like, we know there actually was a shipping for the two of them to be together for a while, which is odd.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny, one of the stories I'm reading right now, the author left you can read the notes at the end, and they just wrote, make it like smashing their faces together like two Barbies. And I was like, I mean, essentially.
That's funny.
The quote continues, despite all of this negativity, I believe fandom is an incredibly positive thing. I'm gay, and the first time I ever saw a gay character in a story was in fanfiction. Fanfiction gave me stories about people like me when I couldn't find them anywhere else. That is the power of transformative media like fanfic and fan art. In a world where so many people don't get to see themselves on TV, fandom can offer them a place where they can be the hero of the story they know and love. Fandom enables anyone to create with an established world. It enables writers to create stories that go beyond the canon media and gives artists the power to explore new scenes and what ifs. There are thousands of people right now creating this content for free simply because they enjoy it. And I do think I always try to make this point because critiquing media is healthy. We all like problematic things, but there's a way to do that healthily. There's a way to do that without threatening people or yelling at people or harassing people. And it's funny to me the ways technology like this all started as sort of an attempt to better control content searches on Tumblr. So when they were like, you can put in this anti-whatever tag, they were trying to clamp down on like bad behavior, honestly. But then it led to this. So that's just interesting to me. And also back to what you were saying, when it becomes a part of your identity, and then that it becomes so personal, and you can't see anything else. Like it has to be this way because it's so important to me. Another thing that Jamie brought up was this sort of forcing of romance, or this prioritizing of romance. And I talked about this recently because, yes, I have been posting fan fiction. And
what's the name again?
Never. But there is this, I found myself writing romance, and it's like really sweet romance, which I think makes sense. It's much more like a holding hands type of romance than anything else. But I did get in my head about like, it just feels so much of what I read that romantic love is seen as more powerful love, like the most powerful love, as compared to friendship. And so it can be strange when you're reading all of the stuff like that, you're writing stuff like that, and you're asexual. And, like, I have found, especially within the past couple of years, a lot more depictions of asexual characters and even asexual romances where, they have to talk and they're like, yeah, I just like kissing, but nothing more. And they're like, okay, cool. And I have seen more non-sexual relationships, but a lot of times that's what it is. Like a good amount of times, like maybe not the whole thing, but it's in there somewhere. And as we've discussed before, there's also that strange tightrope of for so long women have been shamed for wanting sex, and so I'm like, embrace it, but also at the same time, like, it doesn't have to be that for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of strange there. And I've also been thinking about this too, of this understanding that everyone sees romance the same way, or they must all want it, which isn't true. And I think that comes up a lot of times in shipping wars, because if you're finding like your evidence, not everybody sees that evidence the same way. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Even if like you don't agree,
right?
But like some people might see something as romantic, and other people might see it as like not romantic at all.
Yeah.
So there's that difference too. And I do think this is tricky, because I've heard before this argument: why can't they just be friends, especially between two men who have just a close relationship? Why does it have to be romantic? And I think that it speaks to a couple of things. The fact that we put men in a box where they can't be emotionally vulnerable with other men or physically affectionate. So that's like, look at how they're being so emotionally vulnerable. They must be in love. And the fact that women are always the romantic interest in so much of media. And the fact that we don't have enough queer storylines in mainstream media, especially front and center. So it's sort of like, as we say so often, we just need more representative, diverse stories. So we're not always like, I'm so desperate for this queer story, though. Can't it be them? But also have platonic relationships. And then there's been arguments about fetishizing homosexuality in that way, too, which is certainly a part of it. And then this is sort of a separate issue, but I wanted to mention it. When the media reports on this, especially fan fiction, they find the most bizarre fan fiction. I'm almost always like, I think you might actually read fan fiction, because you have plumbed the depths. You found something.
You found something.
And I read a lot, and I have never seen this. And either make fun of it, force celebrities to read it, or frame it as this like depravity of young girls and make an argument about why we need to censor things. So that a lot of times with shipping wars and gets in the news, and they're reading fan fiction, and it's like the wildest thing I've ever heard. And I've read some stuff. Oh, and this was about a specific incident where it was at a convention, and a fan, it was a supernatural convention, I think. The fan got up to ask about, I don't know, but everyone thought they were going to ask about shipping.
No.
It wasn't that. They later found this fan, and it wasn't that. But that's what everyone thought, and they got removed by security.
Even before they could ask the question?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes. And so here's a quote from Hypable about that. What is so horrible about slash shipping and asking the actors about it? Why should asking Ackles about whether Dean might possibly have feelings for Castiel be more taboo than asking him about Dean slash Lisa, whether he thinks Dean should die at the end of the series or what his favorite moment filming season 8 was? For those who claim that they've been asked about slash shipping a million times and that it just makes everyone uncomfortable, this might be the case, sure, but these guys do like 20 conventions a year. Do you really think that there's one single question which you could possibly ask them, which they haven't had to answer at least a dozen times before? The difference seems to be that some fans believe it is harassment to force the actors to confront the possibility that their characters might be homosexual. So singling out slash shipping or shipping in general, when there is so much more that might be awkward for the actors to be confronted with, that is problematic. Whether you're an actor, a creator, or a fan, I have to question the logic that slash shipping is cool as long as we don't talk about it. Don't ask, don't tell. Really, fandom? Which was a good point. I do hate going to these like Q&A things because it's always like, what are they going to ask? But it's true. They've heard these questions like a million times. Right. All of them. There's not like an original question. I went and saw one actor once and he just was like, I'm not going to do the Q&A because I hear the same questions all the time. And he just went down a list of questions and answered them. I was like, yeah, probably you would know.
Yeah.
And then from Vox, here's a quote. Conflating ships that involve underrepresented identities with the desire for inclusion gets especially dicey when it leads fans to prioritize support for their ship over other intersectional concerns. For example, in Teen Wolf fandom, fans of the Steric ship, Derek/Styles, have frequently accused the show of queerbaiting or exploiting their specific queer male pairing without any intention of following through on it, even though the show's creator, Jeff Davis, is a gay man who has already inserted several queer relationships in the show's storylines, and even though Steric, as it currently exists in canon, is a physically abusive relationship. The prioritization of a ship at the expense of another intersectionality concerns is also present on The 100, which earlier this year featured a queer canonical relationship between main character Clark and the warrior queen Lexa, aka Clexa. Clexa fans have been so focused on advocating for Clexa, even after the ship effectively ended with Lexa's untimely death, that they've come under fire for ignoring the many elements of the show that some feels are racist and problematic. Yeah. I think that's a really good point as well, because when you're just attacking people who don't like your ship and you're not thinking of anything else, it's not a good look. It's not a good look.
Yeah.
As sort of a wrap up here, I did mention I was going to say my thoughts. So I do ship, even though I am an ace person. But a lot of times I ship. I found a really fun article about the fun of shipping someone who's never going to end up together. It's kind of nice. You're kind of like, you find your little niche fandom of all of your like online friends who you'll never meet or talk to, but you're kind of like, we're the ones that like this ship that we know is never going to be canon. We never once thought it would be. Like, there's just no chance of it. And I think there has been a couple of things I've shipped where people have gotten upset and they're like, I can't believe I thought they would end up together. And sometimes I'm honestly so surprised. I'm like, I never actually thought this was going to happen, but you did, eh? And I get it. I feel bad. It does suck when you're like, oh, that didn't go how I wanted it to go. But also, as we've been talking about, sometimes fans do regret when their ship happens, like with Buffy and Spike. And, like attempted rape that happened in their relationship.
Ew.
And sometimes the ship happens and they break up or they're killed off. Like, it's not like if your ship does become canon, everything's going to be the best thing and the happiest thing. And I think, like, going back to, like, not trusting the creators, I just have been hurt so hard. It's not that I don't trust them, but I'm like, yo, I'm going to be much happier if I just do this in my own world and it doesn't become canon.
Right.
Like, I don't need your drama and your studios influencing this. I just will go over here and be let be. And sometimes it's not about that either. It's about what fans believe they should have gotten. canon romances are often looked down upon. And there are people who feel like me and maybe want a ship to happen, but ultimately don't want the entertainment in question to really change. So, like, you don't want it to become a rom-com suddenly, like, but you kind of don't want the relationship to happen. But you have fun imagining it and sharing it with others. And yes, it can be lonely to ship someone barely anyone else does, but it can be very fun. It can be very fun. Here's another quote from Teen Vogue. Shipping-oriented fandom is all about transformation. For many shippers, the pairings we put together in fandom or that come together in a series or on a gossip site are the first time many of us get to see ourselves in relationships that echo the ones we have. Whether it's a queer ships as a gateway to understanding your own identity, or fans of color highlighting ships that center characters of color, the goal of shipping has been to fill gaps and provide room for fans to play with emotional connections. From Vox, for fans feeling fatigue over an embattled struggle to make a ship canon and the crushing disappointment of setbacks or failure, it might help to remember that ships don't have to be canon in order to be transformative and meaningful on both a personal and cultural level. Look at Star Trek's Kirk/Spock. Spurk. That ship never became canon, but it remains one of the most compelling ships ever created. And within canon, it gave us one of pop culture's most enduring symbols of love, their hands touching through the glass. Henry Jenkins famously said that queer fan fiction is what happens when you take away the glass. And sure, it's increasingly possible that savvy creators might go ahead and take away the glass for us, but that doesn't negate the power of fans being able to do it on their own without anyone's help. I love that. It's so funny. It's so true. That's it. You look for the clues, their hands touching through the glass, and then you take away the glass. Oh.
I feel like you're having a moment here.
I am. And then, to close out, I have this thing I found from More Sand on Tumblr. And this was a while back. I found like all of this old archive, like fanish stuff of like 1993 when I was researching this. Very cool. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, shipping got a new meaning for younger folk that seems to translate to, I want these people together for real ASAP. I think the media had something to do with it. But guys, shipping absolutely does not mean demanding anything from people/creators. Shipping isn't about expecting and waiting for the day it will certainly happen. It is not a direct translation to happen or die. Shipping means you like the idea of two or more people together. You like the concepts. You find it fun to imagine the dynamics. You even create fan and content of it. Fic, art, edits. It's all in your head and it's fine that way. Is it nice to have a ship become canon? Oh my God, yes. But that's not what shipping is about. And y'all need to take a step back and breathe because being a jerk to people ain't going to change their mind about ships. Yep. Yeah. But yeah. I just want to say to people, and you know who you are, who have watched Good Omens and you're happy, I'm happy for you.
Vague.
I told you I didn't want to spoil it, but...
Okay.
Yes. I mean, like all things we talk about, there's obviously really bad behavior, but there's really good behavior too. And a lot of it is that. And it can be so fun and so beautiful. And I love that too of like the idea, just because it doesn't become canon doesn't mean it can't be transformative. So yes, here's our shipping episode.
I like towards the end, you're just going faster and faster, trying to make it.
Yeah. I also will say I wrote an essay about this for Jamie that you can find about my thoughts about shipping. But that's what I have to say for now. So thank you, Jamie, for the suggestion. And if you would like to contact us, if you have any thoughts about this, I'm sure that you do. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff One Never Told You. We have a TeePublic store. We also have a book that you can order. It is available at stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
I was going to say something about shit, but it wasn't going to be right. So thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stefan Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite shows.